Welcome back to Third Rail. The tragedy in San Bernardino has left many Americans wondering about the proper way to respond.
New York's Daily News took aim at Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, Lindsey Graham, and Paul Ryan for tweeting about their prayers for the victims.
When it comes to gun violence, time and time again, all we hear from these people is thoughts and prayers.
President Obama responded to calls for stricter gun laws.
Democratic candidates for president appeared to echo his sentiment.
This is not about gun control. If you think the shooting in California is about gun control, then you don't understand what's going on in the world.
Let's bring in our panel. Laura Flanders is the host of The Laura Flanders Show, available online and through cable, satellite, and public TV stations. It's broadcast internationally on the news network Telesur English. Amer Zahr is a comedian and an adjunct law professor at the University of Detroit. And Tommy Doherty is a Republican strategist and former senior advisor to New York Governor George Pataki. Thank you for being here. Tommy, I want to believe that somehow there's a way that both sides could come together and realize that when it comes to stopping violence, our commonalities outweigh our differences, and we can agree on something?
You would like to think so, but we're in the midst of a presidential election in this country, and that makes it much more difficult. But I think you need that cooling off period. I think thoughts and prayers are appropriate at first, but you got to get to the facts first. We all jumped to the conclusion that this was another Planned Parenthood attack. This was a terrorist attack. So we should get...
As was the Planned Parenthood
Absolutely, and I agree with that. But let's get to the facts, and then we can have our calls for gun control. We can have our calls to bomb ISIL, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, this thought that prayers were wrong and they got a lot of criticism, I'll go with the prayers for the first half hour, and then we can get to the serious issues.
Amer, is there a wrong way to respond to an attack like this?
Yeah, bombing Syria, bombing Iraq, telling Muslims that they shouldn't be allowed to come to America anymore. I mean, all of the Islamophobia that's going on in America are all the wrong ways to respond to any of these kinds of things. You know, I would take umbrage with calling this a terrorist attack as if it's unique to other attacks in America. It's just like Planned Parenthood. I mean, if these guys were inspired by ISIS, why wasn't the Planned Parenthood shooter inspired by the Republican Party? And Fox News has been doing this kind of stuff and demonizing Planned Parenthood for weeks and months in this country. So, I mean, if you looked at mass shootings in this country, and you were, if we were to keep score, and you were to compare non-Muslim shooters to Muslim shooters, it's like 353 to 2 in 2015.
It doesn't even compare.
So yeah, so I mean, this is not an issue necessarily of looking at all of Islam like the Republican Party seems to be doing for the most part in this country, and a lot of Americans as well.
I mean, let me just disagree with that real quickly. I think that, you know, don't take Trump as the Republican brand, and don't take Trump as someone who speaks for the Republican Party. I think today you saw...
Well, it'd be nice, but
a third of Republican primary voters today say they're voting for him. That's a very small number in the overall Republican Party, and you saw Speaker Ryan as well as a number of other Republicans express outrage over what Trump did.
Yes, I think the irony here is that Donald Trump doesn't know it yet, but he's doing for Islamophobia what Westboro Baptist Church did for homophobia.
Absolutely.
But Tom, I want to ask you about this. Attorney General Loretta Lynch has walked back some comments that the Justice Department would take action when hateful speech edges towards violence and anti-Muslim rhetoric. Her words. Former New York Governor and your former boss, George Pataki, tweeted, "We must declare war on radical Islam. At Loretta Lynch, I'm not edging towards violent speech. I'm declaring we kill them. Go ahead, arrest me." Pataki, tacky?
No, I mean, look, I think we have to call it what it is. I mean, there is a segment of the Islam population, you know, there is a radical portion of that religion that is a problem right now, and we have to confront that problem. By no means, the overwhelming group of people of Islam faith, of Muslim faith, are great people.
There is
but that's not brave.
Better recruiting tool for ISIS
we
than
keep saying
this kind of
you,
talk.
You
I mean, hate speech isn't just tacky, it is fomenting exactly what Amer's
great,
talking
but it
about.
seems that there's been a lot of fomenting and a lot of gathering without that. The reaction to this happened after they have been beheading journalists, they've been drowning their own people, and we've seen the videos. So now all of a sudden, because we said we have to go after
when
these
do you start the clock?
Tom, I do think the confusion a lot of folks have with the Republican Party at this point is that they keep criticizing the president for not using the phrase radical Islam, as if that would make them lay down their arms, when in reality it would alienate millions of our allies.
I mean, Trump is not the only one in the Republican Party who's spewing Islamophobic and hateful rhetoric. It's all throughout the Republican Party, all the candidates. It's part of all of their platforms. And what it does is it marginalizes the 99.9% of Muslims who have nothing to do with ISIS at all.
In fairness, though, Amer, we should point out that President President George Bush bent over backwards to remind people that Islam is not our enemy and that Muslims are our allies. And it does seem that George W. Bush looks rather sage-like on the current political landscape.
But we didn't hear that from my Democratic friends at the time. But we didn't hear them applauding George Bush. We didn't hear shows like this where they stood there and said, "Great job, Mr. President. You brought us together. You did the right thing," etc. They criticized.
No, that's not true.
That is
That's
true.
really not the point, though. I don't
George
think.
W. Bush also unleashed the wars that are now, coming home to roost in our country. He's the one who said, well, we have to fight them there so we don't fight them here.
And
what kind of goading language do you think that was?
And it is a fair point. What can be done at this point to get both sides to come together? We have one side of the issue that says we have to have prayers, we have to have calls for greater mental health screening. Donald Trump goes even more extreme, although his speeches are better in the original German. Then we've got the progressives who say that gun control alone can do it, when clearly it's going to take more than that.
Look, what we need is what Obama did mention in his speech, although the New York Times and their reporting of it didn't see fit to even refer to it or mention it, which is diplomacy and talks, and that's not going to be helped by anti-Islamic language
Who are you
coming
having
out of.
diplomacy and talks with? This isn't a country. Who are we talking to?
Well,
I don't even know who are their leaders.
Let's be clear. Radical Islam, or whatever you're calling it, as
What do you call it?
crazy people. But as a movement is not something that we've always been philosophically against. I mean, if this were the 1980s and they were fighting in Afghanistan against the Russians, they would be sitting down with Reagan in the White House. What is
your solution?
The solution is to stop the rhetoric that Islam as a religion has anything to do with this at all.
Okay, so we stop
that
the rhetoric.
It's a political problem.
Okay, so
and you solve it politically.
So tell me how you solve it politically.
You stop supporting the regimes in the Middle East that have been supporting ISIS. I mean, the way our foreign policy talks to us now is that we hate ISIS, we love Saudi Arabia. So what does that mean? Does that mean there's good beheadings and bad beheadings? I don't get it. I mean, there is no consistency in the way that we treat. I mean, every secular Arab leader over the past 50 years we've overthrown, and all the fundamentalist religious ones are our allies.
The conflict ends when they no longer want to kill us, and I don't think killing them necessarily gets us there, but we do have to move on. I want to move on to do you buy it? Okay, I'm going to state a premise, a commonly held piece of conventional wisdom, and see if our panelists agree. Amer, President Obama recently restated his belief that climate change is a greater threat to America than ISIL. Do you buy it?
Well, empirically, climate change is a greater threat. We're talking about millions and millions of people could die, and it's real, it's not fake. But people can't see it because it seems too imaginary to some people, and ISIS and other things like that seem much more immediate. But climate change empirically is a way, way bigger problem than ISIS for sure.
Is it fair to say that perhaps big money in politics is a greater threat because that prevents any action on climate change?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think a lot of things in this world are bigger problems than ISIS. Big money in politics and climate change just being just two of them.
Human greed.
There's a lot of problems. I mean, guns. There's so many things in America that are bigger problems. You're much more likely to die, unfortunately, in many other ways than you are by anything related to ISIS.
You guys and your stats. Tom, the New York Times recently used a new gender-neutral prefix, MX, or mix, for transgender folks who don't identify as male or female, as opposed to the common Ms. or Mr. Do you buy that?
I don't care. I mean, I think this is one of the most irrelevant things. If the New York Times wants to call somebody a man and a woman and call it MX, I mean, we have a lot bigger problems in this country, in this world, than to worry about what the New York Times is going to call somebody. I mean, I'm a little confused because I'm, as you know, if Bruce Jenner wants to become Caitlyn Jenner, God bless, I'm all for it, I'm supportive of it, but I thought that means he went from a Mr. to a Ms.
And he did.
Right. Who's the MX? I mean, I don't know if one day you're a man, one day
Sting's son refuses to identify as one gender or another. Is one
so
example.
We need to create a whole new set of... Fine, I'm okay with it.
Score one for Liberty. Laura, the University of Southern California's former head football coach, is suing the school after he was fired for showing up in no condition to work. He says his alcoholism is an illness and a disability. Do you buy it?
Well, this is one of those stories that is trying to do a gotcha on the Americans with Disability Act to make it sound ridiculous. I mean, the ADA does require some minimal protection for people with disabilities, and they do include alcoholism as a disability. But does that mean you can show up at work intoxicated? No, it does not. It means that maybe your employer could help you take some time off to go to a meeting. But again, this is one of those stories that you think, why do you have so much regulation? This is absurd. Protecting people because they're alcoholics. That's not what the law is intended to do, and it's not actually what the law does. So that suit's going to go
And
nowhere.
they should
I
fine him for
don't buy
embarrassing
it.
the university at their homecoming dinner where he made a complete jackass of himself.
It is a horrible disease. You have a great time, you'd hate it. But would a fair compromise be having employers be mandated to not fire alcoholic or drug-addicted staffers, but rather provide them with the treatment they need?
Well, that's open to all sorts of discussion. But the treatment, as I said, is to provide them with time to go to meetings, for sure. And again, the point about discrimination law, it doesn't have anything to do with behavior. Like, you don't have to tolerate any kind of behavior on the job.
But the guy working the Ford Motor Line at $45,000 a year, yeah, he should get that help. The football coach making $5.5 million a year, I'm not sure we should keep him around, much beyond.
That's another point that I think would cross a lot of political lines. Donald Trump will win the 2016 GOP presidential nomination. Do you buy it?
No. Once we get through Iowa and New Hampshire, the race becomes a lot less people in the race. When you have party leaders now calling him out, that's the first step.
When Dick Cheney becomes a moderate, you mean?
Dick Cheney was for gay marriage before Obama and Hillary Clinton. So,
do you buy it that Trump will be the nominee?
I don't think so. I mean, it's scary that Trump has gotten as far as he has gotten, but then you just have to go back and say, well, we're the country that lets Trump be the leader in the Republican primary right now, but we're also the country that elected the African Muslim guy with a weird name to be president twice. So
don't forget Kenyan. Don't forget Kenyan.
That's right. So I think there's hope.
Laura?
I'm with Tom, as I said. Let's have him win.
Laura Flanders, Amer, Zahr, and Tom Doherty, thank you all so very much for joining us. I think we solved every geopolitical crisis in the world in this short segment. That does it for this edition of Third Rail. I'm John Fugelsang. Thank you so much for watching.